It all began innocently enough. 7-year-old Toby had been begging his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Adesola, for a smartphone. "All my friends have one," he whined, his big brown eyes sparkling with hope. His parents hesitated at first, worrying he might be too young. But after weeks of persistent pleading, they gave in. What harm could it do? They thought, not realizing that this decision would set off a chain of events they could never have imagined. At first, everything seemed fine. Toby used his phone to play games, watch cartoons, and video call his cousins. The little device became his favorite companion, and his parents, reassured by how entertained he was, felt they had made the right choice. But the subtle changes began soon after. Toby, who once loved playing outside with his friends, started skipping hide-and-seek games instead of staying glued to the glowing screen. Dinner time, once filled with his lively chatter, turned into quiet meals interrupted only by the occasional grunt as he scrolled through videos. It wasn't just Toby. His older sister, Ifeoluwa, who was 12 then, had also been gifted a smartphone by her parents. Ifeoluwa loved books and could often be found curled up in a corner reading. But after she got her phone, her reading sessions grew shorter and less frequent. Hours spent on social media began to take their toll. What started as innocent browsing soon spiraled into an obsession with likes, comments, and images of seemingly perfect strangers. Ifeoluwa's self-esteem plummeted as she compared herself to influencers who always appeared to lead flawless lives. Their parents, who initially thought the phones were harmless, began noticing the strain. Toby, once a top student, started struggling in school. His focus wavered, and he frequently forgot to do his homework. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa, who was once confident and outgoing, became moody and withdrawn. "It's just a phase," their father would say. But their mother wasn't so sure. What they didn't know was that both of their children were being preyed upon by a sinister group of people online. It started as a game. Toby often played online multiplayer games where he could chat with other players. One day, he met Ade, who introduced himself as a fellow gamer. At first, Ade was just another friendly player. Over time, however, Ade gained Toby's trust by sharing tips, cheering him on, and chatting with him regularly. As Toby grew older, Ade's influence deepened. By the time Toby was 14, Ade had become more than just a cyber friend. He would send Toby data and small gifts, sometimes even delivering them to his school without his parents' knowledge. Ade made Toby feel special and trusted, and soon the boy began confiding in him. Ifeoluwa, now 17, wasn't spared either. She had befriended someone online who encouraged her to take pictures of herself in skimpy clothing. "It's just for fun," the person would say, promising her data and expensive gifts in return. Oblivious to the danger, Ifeoluwa played along, her self-esteem tethered to the validation of a faceless stranger. One day, Ade asked Toby to meet him outside his school at closing time. Toby, blinded by trust, agreed without hesitation. On the same day, Ifeoluwa's online friend made the same request. Neither sibling knew about the other's plans. When school ended, a luxurious car pulled up outside the school gate. Both Toby and Ifeoluwa were shocked to see each other. "What are you doing here?" they asked in unison. Before they could piece together the coincidence, a man stepped out of the car and raised his shirt to show them a hidden gun tucked inside his trousers. "Get in," he ordered, his voice cold and commanding, "or your parents will suffer." Terrified, they obeyed. The car sped through desolate streets, eventually leaving the city lights behind and plunging into a dense, eerie forest. The air inside the vehicle was thick with tension, and neither Toby nor Ifeoluwa dared to speak. Their captors, masked and silent, exuded a menacing aura that made every second feel like an eternity. When the car finally came to a stop, they were dragged out and led through a narrow, unlit path into a decrepit, abandoned warehouse. The space was dimly lit by flickering candles arranged in a circle, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The smell of burnt herbs and something metallic, possibly blood, hung heavily in the air. Inside the circle stood several hooded figures, their faces hidden. The leader, cloaked in black with a snake emblem embroidered on their chest, spoke in a guttural, almost inhuman voice that echoed through the cavernous space. The initiation began. Toby was forced to kneel before a blood-stained altar, where the leader sliced a shallow cut into his palm and pressed his hand against an ancient-looking book. The book seemed to pulse under his touch, as if alive, and the leader chanted words in a language he couldn't understand. Suddenly, the candle flames roared unnaturally high, bathing the room in an ominous red glow. Ifeoluwa's ordeal was far worse. She was blindfolded and led into another chamber, where chilling whispers surrounded her. She felt cold, slimy hands tracing symbols onto her skin, leaving a burning sensation that made her want to scream. Her blindfold was removed to reveal a grotesque mural on the wall. A female figure with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth painted in crimson. The cult leader ordered her to drink from a chalice filled with a thick, foul-smelling liquid. She hesitated, but the cold steel of a knife pressed against her neck forced her compliance. As she drank, her vision blurred, and she felt a searing pain in her chest, as if something was clawing its way into her heart. Both Tobi and Ifeoluwa were then made to swear loyalty on pain of death. The leader lifted a blade coated in what looked like fresh blood and held it inches from their throats. "Betray us, and you will die. Your family will die," the voice intoned. A pair of photographs, of their father and mother, were thrown into the fire in front of them, signaling that the cult already knew far too much about their lives. The initiation concluded with each of them being branded. A heated metal symbol was pressed onto the skin on their chest, leaving an indelible mark that pulsed with pain. The smell of burning flesh and their muffled screams would haunt them for years to come. When it was over, they were blindfolded again and shoved back into the car. The return trip felt surreal. By the time they were dropped off at home, just before their parents came back from work, the rays of dawn were breaking, painting the sky in warm colors that starkly contrasted the cold horror they had just endured. It was as if nothing had happened, yet everything had changed forever. Toby shut the door to his room and locked it, leaning against it as if he feared someone might burst in at any moment. He slid to the floor, clutching his knees to his chest, his heart pounding in his ears. The events of the night replayed in his mind like a never-ending nightmare. The blood on his hand, the chilling chant, the unblinking stare of the hooded figures. His branded arm throbbed, a burning reminder of the unholy vow he'd been forced to take. When he finally managed to look in the mirror, the boy he saw staring back at him was a stranger. His wide, bloodshot eyes were filled with fear and something else, shame. He rubbed at the mark on his arm until his skin was raw, desperate to erase the evidence of what had happened. But no amount of scrubbing could rid him of the truth. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa sat frozen on her bed, her fingers tracing the still-burning brand on her chest. The searing pain was nothing compared to the clawing terror that gripped her chest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the grotesque mural from the warehouse, the hollow eyes of the figure seeming to bore into her soul. She could still taste the foul liquid they had forced her to drink, and her stomach churned violently at the memory. When their parents returned home, their mother immediately noticed that something was off. Mother knocked on the door, asking if Ifeoluwa was okay. "I'm fine, just tired," she lied, her voice trembling. The thought of telling anyone, even her family, was terrifying. The photographs thrown into the fire flashed in her mind, a reminder that her loved ones were just as vulnerable as she was. Then she knocked on Toby's door. He said he was fine and busy with schoolwork. Toby and Ifeoluwa couldn't even bring themselves to call each other. The weight of their shared trauma was too heavy, and neither knew how to comfort the other. They both avoided their families, spoke only when spoken to, and flinched at sudden movements or loud noises. At night, sleep became an impossible luxury. Toby would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, his body rigid with fear. Every creak of the house felt like a footstep, every gust of wind seemed like a whispered threat. Ifeoluwa wasn't faring any better. She spent most nights curled up in the corner of her room, clutching her knees to her chest and rocking back and forth, haunted by the ghostly whispers from the initiation. Both of them began withdrawing from the world. At school, they avoided their friends, stopped participating in class, and spent every free moment in isolated silence. Tobi's once lively personality was replaced by a cold, detached demeanor. He avoided eye contact, his mind always racing with dark thoughts about the gang he'd been forced into. Ifeoluwa, once the life of every conversation, became a shadow of herself. She barely ate, her once vibrant smile replaced by hollow stares. The fear of the female ring loomed over her, and she began to see every stranger as a potential threat, every laugh as a secret mockery. The trauma wrapped around them like chains, dragging them deeper into despair. They couldn't talk about it, they couldn't escape it. Their lives were no longer their own, and they both knew that any attempt to break free could cost them everything, and everyone they loved. The morning after the initiation, both Tobi and Ifeoluwa received messages from unknown numbers. The texts were chillingly specific, referencing details about their lives no one else should know. Tobi's message included a recent photo of his father at work, while Ifeoluwa's had her mother walking to the market. The cult's message was clear. We are always watching. To reinforce the fear, the cult would send cryptic messages at odd hours like, "Don't forget who owns your soul now. One wrong move, and they suffer." These constant reminders of their power kept Tobi and Ifeoluwa on edge, afraid to even delete the messages for fear of retribution. The manipulation took a darker turn when the cult began assigning them tasks. At first, these tasks seemed minor, but were designed to test their obedience. Tobi was instructed to deliver a small, unmarked package to a specific address without asking questions, while Ifeoluwa was told to take a picture of a stranger at her local cafe and send it to the number. When they hesitated, the cult sent chilling follow-ups, such as videos of their loved ones going about their daily lives, accompanied by a single line, "Don't make us remind you what's at stake." Over time, the demands became more disturbing. For Tobi, the gang pressured him to engage in criminal acts. They sent him videos of violent assaults and instructed him to participate in a similar initiation for a new recruit. He was told to film himself intimidating someone in the neighborhood to prove his loyalty, and for Ifeoluwa, the female ring ordered her to act as bait for their schemes. She was instructed to lure a man to a secluded spot under the guise of friendship so he could be robbed. She sobbed after the act, but her tears didn't erase the haunting text she received afterward. "Good work. You belong to us now." Unknown to them, the cult had secretly recorded their initiation rites, capturing every moment of their coerced participation. Occasionally, they would receive short clips from the videos, accompanied by messages like, "Should we show this to your school, or maybe your family?" The threat of exposure was enough to keep them compliant. Every time they considered defying the orders, they would remember the humiliating and horrifying footage that could ruin their lives. The cult installed tracking software on their phones during the initiation. Tobi and Ifeoluwa soon realized their every move were being monitored. They received messages commenting on their daily routines, like, "Why are you spending so much time at the park? You're late coming home today. Be careful." The constant surveillance left them feeling like prisoners in their own lives. Even when they weren't receiving tasks, they felt the cult's presence looming over them. As the months went by, the tasks became increasingly demanding. Tobi was instructed to steal from his father and deliver the money to the gang. Ifeoluwa was forced to manipulate her friends into joining the female ring. With every action, their guilt deepened, but the cult's psychological grip made resistance impossible. The worst part was the cult's gaslighting tactics. They would send messages like, "You're better off with us. The world doesn't care about you. You've already crossed the line. Why stop now?" This erosion of their self-worth made them feel complicit, as though they had no choice but to continue. The breaking point came when they were both ordered to do the unthinkable, betray someone close to them. Tobi was tasked with planting evidence to incriminate a friend, while Ifeoluwa was told to drug a classmate. Both acts left scars they couldn't erase, and their souls felt as if they were slipping further into darkness. Each beep of their phones became a source of dread. The cult didn't just control their actions, they owned their minds, their fear, and their futures. Over the months that passed, their mother had grown increasingly suspicious. She had once acted on a hunch and installed hidden cameras in strategic places around their home. While she wasn't entirely sure what she was looking for, her instincts told her something wasn't right. For 2 months, she dutifully reviewed the footage, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Unknown to her, Tobi's cyber friend Aid had taught him how to identify and avoid hidden cameras. However, one camera had gone unnoticed, positioned just outside the house behind a security light. Tobi and Ifeoluwa's mother, Mrs. Adesola, began to notice the subtle but alarming changes in her children. Tobi, once lively and mischievous, now spent most of his time locked in his room, his eyes constantly glued to his phone, jumping at every notification. He had become distant, avoiding family dinners and shrugging off questions with curt replies. Ifeoluwa, on the other hand, was no longer the bubbly girl who filled their home with laughter. She was withdrawn, avoiding eye contact and walking around as though carrying the weight of the world on her young shoulders. Mrs. Adesola noticed her daughter flinching whenever someone touched her unexpectedly or raised their voice, even slightly. She tried asking them what was wrong, but they either changed the subject or insisted they were fine. Her mother's intuition, however, told her something sinister was at play. On the day everything unravelled, it was this hidden camera that provided the crucial clue. As their mother reviewed the footage from earlier that evening, she saw an unfamiliar luxury car pull up to the house. Tobi and Ifeoluwa emerged from the car, looking shaken and nervous. Her heart raced. Something was definitely wrong. Determined to uncover the truth, she devised a plan. Late one night, after both Tobi and Ifeoluwa had fallen asleep, she quietly entered their rooms and took their phones. She unlocked them using the patterns she had memorized from discreetly watching them earlier. What she found sent chills down her spine. The mother's hands trembled as she read the threats against her children and family. Tobi's phone was filled with alarming messages from someone named Aid. Their conversations stretched back years, starting innocently enough with gaming tips and harmless jokes. But over time, the messages took a darker turn. Aid had manipulated Tobi, sending him data, gifts, and even money, gradually gaining the boy's trust. Then came the instructions: meeting outside the school, secretive tasks, and thinly veiled threats against his family if he refused to comply. On Tobi's phone, she found threatening messages from unknown numbers. Complete the task, or we'll pay your visit. Don't forget, we're watching you. There were also videos of Tobi delivering packages and intimidating others, his face a mask of fear as he carried out the orders. While on Ifeoluwa's phone revealed a similar nightmare. Her friend had encouraged her to take provocative photos, promising her validation and gifts in return. The messages were laced with compliments and coercion, making her feel special while trapping her in a web of fear. The evidence was just as damning. There were photos of her posing with strangers, clearly under duress, and videos of her sobbing after completing tasks. The messages she received were equally menacing. Good girl. Disobedience has consequences. Don't make us show you. Worst of all, Mrs. Adesola stumbled upon footage of the initiation ceremony. The masked figures, the blood, the eerie chants. It was the stuff of nightmares. Her hands shook as she pieced together the puzzle. Unable to stomach the horror alone, she showed everything to her husband. Mr. Adesola, though equally horrified, remained composed and insisted they needed to act smartly to ensure the culprits were caught. The couple decided to involve the police, but they were careful to keep Tobi and Ifeoluwa in the dark, fearing that the cult might retaliate if they sensed anything amiss. At the police station, the evidence from the phones left the officers stunned. The lead investigator assured the Adesolas that they would handle the matter discreetly to avoid endangering the family. The police installed advanced tracking software on Tobi and Ifeoluwa's phones to intercept the cult's communications. Using the intercepted messages, the police tracked the cult's activities. They uncovered how the group used games, gifts, and fake online personas to lure children. They targeted vulnerable kids through social media platforms and manipulated them into attending secret gatherings under the guise of friendship or fun. Through the tracker, they pinpointed the cult's meeting locations and even intercepted real-time communications, which provided more evidence of their criminal activities. The investigation revealed how the group groomed children into committing crimes by threatening their families and exploiting their fears. After weeks of gathering evidence, the police orchestrated a covert operation to dismantle the cult. With a team of undercover officers and the location of the cult leader obtained through the phone trackers, they launched a midnight raid on their hideout. The cult leader, a charismatic but ruthless figure, was arrested along with dozens of members. The warehouse where they operated was filled with incriminating evidence, lists of potential targets, phones used for manipulation, and disturbing paraphernalia from the initiation rites. The cult's takedown was a national sensation, and the Adesola family was praised for their bravery in coming forward. The evidence exposed a massive network of criminals who had been grooming and exploiting children for years. The children were shaken but relieved when their parents and the police revealed the truth. Tobi and Ifeoluwa, once trapped in a nightmare, now had a chance to reclaim their lives. They underwent therapy to heal from the trauma and rebuild their confidence, and their parents supported them every step of the way while tightened their boundaries around technology use. The case became a catalyst for public awareness, sparking conversations about online safety and the dangers of unchecked digital access for children. Laws were tightened, and parents across the country became more vigilant, ensuring that no child would ever fall victim to such horrors again. This story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking in the digital world. What started as a simple act of giving Tobi a smartphone spiraled into a cautionary tale for all parents. Phones can be powerful tools, but without proper monitoring and guidance, they can also become doorways to unimaginable harm. Let this be a wake-up call. Stay vigilant, communicate openly with your children, and never underestimate the importance of knowing who they're interacting with online. It might just save their lives.